Deanne's keynote address left me with a very important thought. Every trail, no matter how new or how historic, needs a community to care for it, and that is you, the trail sector. That idea is what our theme this morning and this afternoon is all about. Fostering a more resilient trail sector. It's a theme that so much that has been discussed at our conference is about how will trail operators sustain the sector and meet the needs of a changing climate and diverse trail users. Our first session today explores that theme with representatives from across the sector. Join me in welcoming Mathieu, CEO of Trans-Canada Trail, to the stage to moderate our first panel titled Trailblazers Shaping the Future of Trails.
Thank you, Megan, and welcome everyone. So, yesterday we heard that trail has an incredible role to play for the future of our community, for connecting people together, connecting people with nature, with places, active living, foster a sense of place and belonging. But we need to look in the future. There's hope, and we need to ask ourselves, what does the future hold for the trail sector itself? This morning, we will be exploring the evolving needs of trail users, the opportunity for innovation, the way our sector can adapt and grow. With our panelists' wide range expertise in the areas like engineering, sustainability, community engagement, and GIS technology, we're going to have a great discussion. I do want to recognize before that discussion that this is a small sample of all the expertise existing in the trail sector. We're not representing the entire diversity that contribute to the trail sector. There's no, for example, people in philanthropy on this panel. There's no people with disability. We don't have Indigenous people. But we want to share what we know, what we think could happen, to help shape this future and really ignite a discussion between the attendees at the conference today for the journey. Without further ado, I want to introduce the panelists. Andy Clarke, the Director of Strategy at Toole Design and former President of the League of American Bicyclists. Chuck Flink is the founder and owner of Greenways Incorporated. Demiesha is the founder and director of Brown Girl Outdoors World. Jeff Olson is the founder and vice president of Recharge. And finally, Lesley Johnson is the manager of GIS at Trans-Canada Trail. If you want to learn more about the work, the exceptional work that these persons are doing, please meet them today. They're going to be around. They will be very happy to share more about what they do and what they can help you shape the future with. So let's dive into the first question, and I think everyone on this panel will probably have a different answer. What does the trail sector need to do to serve the next generation? And I will start with you, Lesley.
Thanks, Mathieu. In the 5 years that I've been working with Trans-Canada Trail, I've had the opportunity of working with volunteer groups, trail associations, big and small. And I think what I've heard from them over the years is really information is at the heart. They want the next generation of trail users to have the information they need to feel safe and secure before going out on their trails. And to make that happen with small trail associations who don't have a lot of resources, I think tech can really help there. Can really get a lot out of very little time put in. And that is what I'm really hopeful for the future is everyone has a mobile device in their phone. And for someone who's never been out on trails before, the trail journey starts online. That is where they have their first trail experience. They go on Google and they look up XYZ trail, and then maybe XYZ trail map. And my concern and what I work through every day is how do I make sure that that information that trail user might find online is as accurate and up to date as possible, And is it enriched with trail stories as well, and texture and color? And so not just that straight trail information, but also learning more about the history and what has happened on that land. And it's incredible work. Yeah.
Thanks, Lesley. Chuck?
Yeah, I'll introduce myself as the inaugural chair of American Trails, 1988, 36 years ago. So what have we done in that span of time to address this same question? I feel like we're guilty of holding these kind of events and insisting people come to us, when I think we should reverse that. I think we should figure out a way to go to where the people are and the interests are. If we want to grow young people in this sector, which by looking at the room we need to do, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody, but I think we have to reach into existing frameworks where young people find themselves. For example, I'm in a university setting now, and the outpouring of interest in this general topic is phenomenal. But the young folks are challenged to figure out how to connect in to these networks. And so that's just one, strategy across the world that we could implement. I mean, we could develop a common syllabus in every, multiple languages for universities across the world, and create a portal, an opportunity for young folks to get involved, because there's such a pent-up demand. So that's just one strategy. But I feel just overall, we need to be better at taking our message out and connecting with people where they are, all different types of people, all different ethnicities, and encouraging them to be a part of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think the presentation of the task team this morning is really a good link to what you just answered.
Exactly.
Demiesha?
Good morning, everyone. For myself, what I see is the need for an invitation. It's as simple as opening that door to say to someone, come in, you belong here, here's how we're inviting you in. I think if we look at the room, if we look at the presentations that we've seen this week, if we hear the conversations, it's all been a very monolithic approach to what the future of trails can look like. We lack the dreaded word diversity that has now been kind of seen as it's okay in one setting and not okay in the other. We've heard so much about diversity this week in terms of flora, fauna, trail diversity, but yes, so we are lacking the diversity when it comes to the human approach to this conversation. So what I see for the future of trails is to open that invitation to so many others who belong in this room, and to release the information that's being safeguarded like a family heirloom. It does us no justice.
Yeah. Thanks. Jeff? And Jeff?
I'm going to speak as an entrepreneur, and I think what we need is scale. There are 400 of us here today. We need 4,000, we need 40,000, we need 4 million. We need to find a way that family heirloom is valuable, right? And we have this incredible resource that the world needs, yet we're just a few blocks from a national capital, and I don't think anyone over there knows that we're here, right? So we need to figure out how to raise our collective voices and the voices that we're not reaching now, and that's the future of trails.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fine, Andy.
The three words I wrote down to prepare for this are opportunity, access, and invitation. And it is clear whenever we build trails, people use them. They are an essential part of our community of the world. And every time we open a trail, they're immediately, even before we open them sometimes, people are using them, and the demand is clearly there. If there are to be places where people can learn to ride a bike, to fly fish, to hike in different ways, those opportunities have to be there. They have to be accessible. We have to enable people to not even realize or think about the fact that they're getting onto a trail, because it is so easy and intuitive for them to do it. And people need to be invited to get onto the trails and need to feel welcome and included when they're on the trail. So those are the same three words. Yeah. So I'm afraid we all are coming up with the same answer, Mathieu. But it's okay.
I agree. And I think to one point you just said, it's the places that make the people disabled. It's not the trail that need to be accessible. So we need to shift our minding on that front too. Yeah. Demiesha, I would like to hear from you about your work. You really are working in reshaping the narrative about the representation in the outdoor sector, and it's central for you. What is our sector, the trail sector, and the tourism sector that we discussed yesterday? What should be our next step to improve diversity, both within the workforce, because we just talked that we need to invite people, and amongst trail users?
It's a very big question for a small person. I will first address the room by saying I don't speak for everyone who's racialized. I don't speak for everyone who needs to have a presence in the room. I don't speak for everyone whose voice you haven't heard over the umpteen years that this trail sector has been at the forefront of conversation. I started earlier by saying creating an invitation. That has been the biggest thing that I've done with my work, is to say I've known this space because I sought out a way to challenge a narrative. When I started in the outdoors, I was born and raised in Jamaica. The outdoors wasn't a concept. It simply was a way of being. I woke up, my grandma fed me breakfast, I was outside, I needed to come back home by the time it was time to shower. So I didn't have to create that relationship. When I moved here to Canada, there was no place for me to merge these two ideas. I had to create that idea of what home is like for me. Came here and all I saw, every store that I walked into, every magazine that I saw printed, I saw myself nowhere. What I did was create a simple invitation for a walk in Toronto to access nearby nature, to give people the idea that you could go outside of your house, still engage with nature, still engage with a trail simply because it exists outside your home. When BGOW, or Brown Girl Outdoor World, which is the organization that I run that takes specifically women of color into the outdoors to experience anything from a simple hike to fly fishing, ice climbing, you name it in the outdoors, if it has a very old white narrative to it, I will do it to challenge it. And I'll bring folks with me so that they can also do that. One of the things that a few key topics, I look at inclusive recruitment, which is something that we don't see happening as often. If we go into the boardrooms, if we go into all the committees that exist around trails, we still look and we see, again, even when we speak about different geographical locations, we still see the same people showing up in these very key positions as well. Where diversity might exist, it is not reflected in who gets to sit at the table. Is the table big enough? Are we pulling more chairs at the table? Are we expanding the conversation enough so that someone who didn't hear themselves can also sit at that table and feel like their voice will matter when the conversation starts? Are we talking about training and education? When we do get to that point of inviting folks in, are we taking the time to educate ourselves? Are we taking the time to train ourselves so that when we start speaking with folks, we're approaching it from an educated place and not an assumptive place? Community engagement. We know, and I mean, this room speaks to community engagement. There is a large community of people that are here, and that is because we're all engaged with trails in one way or the other. How do we expand that conversation outside of who already knows about trails? How do we say this, we've created this really beautiful network of trails that is great for your mental health, great for your physical health. What does it look like to say, let us bring you in, or let us come to you and also tell you how this thing can be really great for you? How do we, when we bring you into the room, how do we remind you that we really wanted you here and we wanted you to engage in that process? We talk about mentorship programs. When I moved here, I did not know what a trail was. What you call a trail here might have been the road that I walked on at home in Jamaica. It would have been where my grandma would have walked from her home to get to a market. It would have been where my grandma would have walked from her home to her neighbor's home. And these probably could have been cut by a cow. It probably could have been cut by a goat that was like just out there grazing. So when I come here and someone says to me, oh, a trail, what do you mean? It's a road. I don't know that as a trail. So educating me as I'm here about what these words are, what these concepts are, and how they can be, again, integrated into what my life looks like. Talking about regular assessment. How often are we going back to these conversations that we already have about, you know, the trails, the systems, the networks, all of that? Are we assessing it to see who's here? Who has, you know, given a conversation? Who has been given space to even begin to realize that their story matters and how trails are going to evolve in the future? Celebrate that diversity. When you get to that point and diversity is such a large topic, and again, we talk about Gender diversity, we talk about every other aspect of diversity, and then we become uncomfortable when it talks about racial diversity. In this big globe that we exist in, there is no denying that everyone from every sector of life exists. And whether or not we want to talk about it, whether or not we want to sit there and have it be another herd of elephants that exists in the room, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're doing ourselves a disservice about who gets to know, love, and want to work to protect the trails that we've taken so much time to build. So talk about the diversity, celebrate it, encourage people to get involved. And again, when you see the elephants come in, don't run. Don't be scared of it. It is something that needs to be addressed, talked about, welcomed, invited, and celebrated at the end of the day.
Let me go. So thank you for that. Some of you who have been to the Ontario Bike Summit may remember a guy by the name of Charles Brown speaking from an organization called Equitable Cities. And he was presenting at the US National Bike Summit 3 or 4 years ago. And people were asking him these angst-ridden questions about how to get a more diverse organization and staff. And he just said, hire more black and brown people. It's really not very difficult. So, I mean, it is. I should phrase that. The idea is not difficult. It can be challenging to do that, but you have to be deliberate and thoughtful to do it. And in the organization that I work for, we have 300 people and have a definite overrepresentation of women in the engineering field in our company. But over the last 3 or 4 years, we have taken a very deliberate and thoughtful approach to hiring to make sure that we are more representative. We are not even close, but we're getting there to that goal. And we have to do it the moment we start thinking about what jobs we're hiring for, how we search for those jobs, who we interview, how we interview, what the onboarding process is, what the inclusivity of our workplace is, and what our retention programs and processes are to make sure people stay. And it is only through addressing all of those with that lens of needing to hire people who are more reflective of the communities we're working in and trying to serve that we've been able to change that picture, literally, of our staff. Every organization should challenge themselves to do that, not just with their staff, but with their boards, their committees, their volunteers, because it doesn't happen just by hoping people show up and because they have never been invited, they have been turned away. So that dynamic needs to change, and it will only change if we do it deliberately and thoughtfully.
Mathieu, can we ask the audience a question?
No?
I want to ask the group a question.
Go ahead.
How many people here have been any training in your career, in your life, on leadership and social change? Fantastic, because I did not expect that answer. Most of us didn't come into what we're doing thinking ourselves being leaders and social change agents. So you just made my day. Thank you.
Chuck, you had
I
something?
wanted to give a very specific example to you about how bad the invitation issue is out there. So about 7 years ago, we went into Memphis to work on a trail project, urban trail project, and that trail project was going to go right through the heart of the African-American neighborhoods in North Memphis. And I was asked if this was going to heal the racial divide. This project was going to heal the racial divide in Memphis because Memphis hadn't been the same since Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. So that's a lot to carry, right? But what I found was that's exactly what that project was about. And the lack of invitation was so significant that when we're out there building trail, people were coming up to us, asking us if in these neighborhoods, is that for us? Are we actually allowed to use that?
Yep. That's
how severe the lack of invitation is. When we were doing our community meetings, I actually planned them for 3 hours because I knew they were going to erupt into chaos because no one had been in these neighborhoods for 50 years talking about anything new. In fact, disinvestment was happening so fast that the neighborhoods were crumbling. And so the first hour, we were yelled at, like, all these things. And then the second hour, they asked, why are you here? And by the third hour, after drinks and cookies, we finally got around to talking about what we were there to do. Yeah. So I just want to throw out this word, intentionality, intentional. You must be very intentional. Look, I'm white, I'm male, I'm American. I don't think about invitation. I just go wherever the hell I want to go because to me, the invitation's always there, right? But if you're black or brown in the United States, the invitation's not there. In fact, just to echo what Andy said, A lot of people are questioned, why are you here? You know, in a public space, in a community. You know, what are you doing here? Why are you dressed like that? You know, kind of stuff. So there's a lot we really have to overcome, really all around the world, with this issue of issuing intentional invitations to participate in these kind of landscapes.
Absolutely.
I'm going to move to the next question for Jeff and Lesley. We know that trail systems are widespread across many countries, but does that mean that everyone got that equitable access to trail? Like Lesley, you're mapping trail, you see on the map where they are located. Is there any innovative strategy that you have seen engage with community to increase the trail stewardship? And Lesley, I would love to hear from you about the location of those trail, and after that, Jeff, those strategy that you see to change a bit the landscape of trail architecture.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time in trails. Technology has advanced considerably to the point where we can have people who have challenges accessing trails, going out for the first time and feeling comfortable. There's blind square technology out there. We have the ability to create tactile features on trails and QR codes on signage, Braille on signage. And I think that's becoming more part of the conversation, and I'm really happy to hear that the task teams are working on that and talking about that. And I really think that with more conversations happening, more face-to-face conversations happening about it, that will just continue to change across the board, not just in urban trail systems that are funded heavily and there's a lot of staff to think about these things, but in rural trails as well, where often it's seen as a nice to have, not a need to have. But as we know, trails are critical infrastructure just as much as roads are, and we need to think about who uses them and who should be using them, and that is everyone. And I'm really excited by the conversations that are happening.
I think it's probably best to tell a story to describe an answer to that question. It's actually a project that Andy and Chuck and I got to work together on, the Grand Canyon Greenway. Every trail project that's represented in this room is important and is a great project. There's no bad trail projects, right? They're all good. But every once in a while, we need that opportunity to provide a catalyst that can create much greater change in society, in our countries, and around the world. And for me personally, that ended up being Grand Canyon National Park. My wife is a former ranger there. She's also a Canadian citizen, by the way. And there was no trail along the rim of the Grand Canyon. It was parking lot, people driving from one spot to park their car to the next, very short distances over more than 20 miles. And we decided that we should change all that. And that project has led to, we were just all out there this past year to see the results of more than 5 million people from every nation on earth go to the Grand Canyon now and walk and bike along the rim of the Grand Canyon. And that change by itself means that those 5 million people are going home and saying, why don't I have this here? Why can't my country be doing this? I'm not saying the United States is the model, but that if you can create that catalyst with the project that you're working on, the power of that change is so significant. And those trails are accessible. They were a model for ADA access in the United States. In fact, some of the codes that were written were based on that project. And the story I want to just quickly tell is that along that trail, we had made a decision that the benches could be designed by the First Nations tribes in that part of the US. And they harvested their own timber and built those benches. And when you go see the Grand Canyon Greenway and you take a seat, you're sitting on a bench that was built by the nations that were there long before us. And one of the moments that you guys were there, I will never forget this. The tribal chief spoke at the ribbon cutting, and she said it was the first time in her nation's history that there was a contract between our two nations. And that was, didn't know that at the time. I have to say it was one of the most powerful moments, not just in my career, but in my life, to know that we made that one thing happen, right? That one thing that this trail could make happen. And now to know that there's millions of things like that happening from that project. So I guess the point being, every trail project has that potential. Find those moments where you can create those moments for many other people.
There was also a moment during that trip when Peter Axelson, who's a wheelchair user and had been part of the design team to make sure that the Greenway system was as accessible as possible, met someone in a wheelchair coming the other way on the trail, and the moment they had where they realized that like the project worked was magic. I will also say it kind of kept us a little bit humble no one gave a damn who we were. No one knew that Grand Canyon Greenway system was new or had been, even the park staff had no clue that this had happened 20, 25 years ago. They were just using it because it was there, because it was intuitive, because there was an invitation, it was accessible, the opportunity was there, and it was easy to do. And those are the things we need to do with our trail systems, trail networks.
Demiesha?
Can you repeat the question for me?
Yeah. I will. With pleasure. So I just want to see when you think about trail, they are widespread, but if you think about air in Ottawa, it's right along the Rideau Canal, for example. I don't think everyone got, that's my personal opinion, an equitable access to trail.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of equity is, again, there are very, very large, there's expectation, very large expectation placed on these words. And we talk about equity and we say everyone is going to, have access. It's kind of like when you look at that idea of we have stairs and we have a ramp. If we have stairs, so many people get left out of buildings. If we have a ramp, every single solitary person who is mobile or who uses a mobile device can enter that building. It's the same thing with our trails. If we're creating trails we have trails in city spaces, and I live in Toronto, and Toronto is a very large city, but there are people who live within my neighborhood who live on this trail right at the Humber Trail who have no knowledge that the Humber Trail exists. There are people who live in Toronto, the Trans-Canada Trail exists in Toronto, yet a ton of people have no clue that every day they bike, walk, every single activity that they do is on this trail. And why don't they know this? Is because they haven't gotten the information about it. The access to that information isn't there. The access to that knowledge, especially within specific communities, isn't there, that this massive thing that is so integral to how we move and how we enter, healthy spaces that are there for everyone in the city to enjoy. But because we have this idea that some people, and I'll say this, those who already have the knowledge are the people who get to use the stairs, when we could have created the space with a simple ramp to give the knowledge to everyone and find creative ways, find intuitive ways to give this information to everyone so that we could use that ramp and bring everyone in. We need the ramp. Why? We need the ramp because, again, we need the people to maintain these trails. We need the people to have a relationship with these trails. It's not just, it's here, go use it. I wouldn't have known had I not gone and done a ton of research, connected to people within communities, because I really wanted that thing, and I wanted it because I wanted belonging. That is the only reason I was able to find trails. So I think for us, it's taking away those stairs that only certain people get to use, and creating the set of ramp that is an equitable way for so many other people to get into that conversation.
And if I'm asking, like, you have different expertise, we think about the future, what is the role of the government policy? Our funders, how do we seek out for money? What should we ask? The technology, what role can it play for the sector to help us invite more people and to become a trailblazer? So,
yeah, I'll jump in. We're seeing a change in the United States. I'm not saying that this translates worldwide, but I've been very interested to see how philanthropic organizations in the United States are really flooding into the trail space, the Greenway space. Why? It checks a lot of boxes. It satisfies a lot of their own. If you look at mission, goals, objective statements of these philanthropic organizations, and then you compare it to what a trail project will develop, they're finding common ground there. And so they're coming into the space and they're supporting it. We've also, in North Carolina, we've just finished up a year-long campaign called the Great Trail State. We've enlisted all 100 counties in our state, got a lot of folks involved, and we went to our General Assembly, which is a very, very, very conservative state. If you know anything about the United States policy or politics, it's a red state. So we went directly after our conservative members and began to educate them on the values that trails had in every single county and every single municipality. We talked about just the wide range of benefits, all of which you guys know because we've been talking about it the last couple of days. And we were able to gain a foothold with certain members of that delegation. And out of that, we've had 2 consecutive funding sort of tranches come through in the tens of millions of dollars in support of trail development, because trails check all these boxes. So this work has been ongoing for many years in the United States. We've been working hard to educate a lot of folks as to all the benefits, from economic to the conservation strategies, to equitable access, to reaching communities large and small, and including all these people in the conversation. And I think it's paying dividends. It's not been easy. I remember one Republican member of the General Assembly calling me and saying to me, I don't know why I can't get more of my members on board with this, because it's just there's so much appeal here, but we're going to keep trying. So it's not necessarily easy, but I think we can really have this conversation. And I really like to say that the Trails agenda is nonpartisan. It has no partisanship, because it appeals to lots and lots of people. But it does take a lot of effort to reinforce that message and turn it into action.
Yeah. Lesley, how technology can help bring new people in the sector?
In every way possible. In my view, technology really is the way that small organizations, volunteer groups, can not only reach more people, grab attention from any visitor across the globe at no cost. It's how they can also ensure their longevity and make sure that the knowledge that those volunteer groups have, often relying just on one person, can be downloaded, get that brain downloaded, put it into a database, make a map, make an Excel sheet, anything, and ensure that that trail will be there forever, and that there will always be someone to take care of it. Technology can be there to be that solution. Technology is not also just cut and dry. It can inspire. We can create incredible digital content, again, very quickly with like Esri apps that they have nowadays. Very easy to create for anyone who doesn't know how to code. It's incredible, and this can just draw in even more attention. And I will also add that making effort to get into the spaces where people are already at. People are already looking at Google Maps. They're already looking at all trails. So put yourself in the place of a new trail user and what that online journey looks like. And that will help you without even having to create a big email blast or create a Facebook group. If you can make sure that that information where people are already looking for it is accurate and has your name on it, or the trail name, or the businesses that you want to highlight, the cafes, the hours are updated, all that really does have a big impact in the long run. I'm that person on trips who's always editing Google and contributing to it and adding new places, because I know it has an impact. And even though I can't maybe spend dollars in a place, it's what I can give back. It's my time, it's making sure that information is accurate for the next person that wants to visit. And so I think technology has a big role to play, and it can sound scary, especially for people who don't feel comfortable with technology. But I will say, with education programs and universities, their curriculums include a lot of technology in their programming already. And so those are great resources. You can reach out to your local institutions if you want help. Geographers are outdoors people. I'm sure that they would love to give a hand to their local trail organization in getting started wherever you're at. I have no problem looking at a dirty Excel spreadsheet, a hand-drawn map, no judgment whatsoever. We really just want to see more trails in more backyards for as long as possible. I think technology is the way to get there. And a last note, we're not scary people, we're quite nice. And yeah, truly, and come talk to us, and we're all trails people at the end. So yeah, it's one key part.
Mathieu, can I go back to the question you asked Chuck for just a second?
Yes.
I want to embrace my role as an angry old white man for just a second, because that's the part of life I'm now in. When I think about what government can do, like there, of course, support for trails and for the work you all do is critically important. But while we are worrying about the making sure that an indigenous tribe is building the benches on our trail, 100 feet over, big oil is like building wells and building pipelines that have a bigger footprint than any trail we can imagine. Big agriculture is clear cutting the forests for whatever they're doing. Like, we have to kind of grow up and deal with the fact that most of what government is doing is bad and wrong, and we need to stop it just as much as we need to be asking to do the right thing with a small sliver of funding that we're able to get out of the process. When we started 40 years ago, we thought that a $100,000 trail project or $1 million trail bridge was like, poof, that's crazy. No one's ever going to buy that. Now Chuck is building, $20 million trail bridges just in one location. So the money is there to do this stuff, but we are just being engulfed. I'm sorry, like at the start, we were encouraged to think about hope. And I'm feeling a little despondent, and my years presenting budgets to my board when I was told that hope is not a strategy was also came to mind while I was listening to Harvey Locke on Tuesday. We need to be smarter about not only what we can do and the good things we're doing, but we've got to figure out how to stop the bad things happening that are overwhelming all of the good that we do.
I'm going to follow with two examples that are hopefully on the hopeful side, right? First one, the Empire State Trail in New York State. You're not far from it here, just across the border. $300 million project, 750 miles, connects all of New York State border to border. Built during the pandemic, 68 different construction sites simultaneously, half a dozen different state agencies, dozens of different contractors and people involved. But it came down to a single conversation, and I want you to put yourself into this room. The governor's office in New York State, where not a lot of trail people go because we're probably intimidated by power like that, walked into the room with the state parks commissioner and one other member of my team, Lindsay, three of us. And the first question the governor's office asked us, can you do this project for $200 million? Can you get it done in 3 years? What's your answer to that question? Yes, of course, right? Completely impossible. What else are you going to say? And they approved the funding. We then found another $100 million over the course of the project to really get it done. But you can go into those rooms, all of us can, and be asking for the biggest things we have ever imagined. It's okay, because the reality is the people on the other side, what we think of as the other side, actually want the same things as us. We just haven't had those conversations. We see them as enemies. We think that they're so powerful that we don't belong in the room. The reality is we're the thing that they've been looking for, and you realize you're completely on common ground. So don't be shy about asking for the biggest thing. God, that's right, I'm on. That's good. And just a second one from my career, which is not directly related, but I think helps speak to this, is one of our companies was the leader in the bike share revolution here in North America. And we launched the bike shares in Washington, D.C., Boston, New York, Chicago, and others. And when it came to New York City, and the mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, who is one of the biggest philanthropists in the world, just gave $1 billion to Johns Hopkins University Medical School, and many other gifts, $30 million to the World Resources Institute that I'm involved in. He said it was all going to be privately funded, 100% private system. And when Citibank was approached for that sponsorship, most of us didn't think that would actually happen. And what became Citi Bike, maybe one of the biggest catalyst projects that'll happen in our movement, but Citibank did not want the same thing we wanted. We wanted more people out riding their bikes. That was what was so important to us. Can we get more people out there of all ages, abilities, races, all of that? Can we get everyone out riding bikes more? That's what we thought bike share was. What did Citibank think it was for? Marketing. Right? It was advertising. Their marketing index for their company skyrocketed just from Citi Bike. More than any sports stadium that they had adopted for much more money. They actually said it was the best marketing spend in the history of marketing. And they said that in Business Week magazine. So the point being in both cases that we can ask for really, really, really big things. Those $1 million projects, Andy, are now about to be $1 billion projects, and it's completely okay because we're spending trillions on other things right now. The United States defense budget every year is $1 trillion. We have enough money to solve the climate problem. We're just spending it on the wrong things because we haven't asked, and that's our role leaving this room.
Well said.
And Demiesha, like the role of education into this to change and grow the sector?
I'm a big proponent of that education word because I think about how I entered this space. I don't have a science background. I was a law clerk. I worked with lawyers for as long as I could before I detested them. And sorry to any lawyers in the room. Legal is important. But education for me sat with how I integrated people in my life, how I integrated stories that didn't look like mine, how I integrated words that I didn't know or words that weren't familiar to me. It looked like how I got outside of what was comfortable to me and how I approached what knowledge could do for me in this space. Education looked like how I approached other individuals who had words that I didn't have, who had access to spaces that I could gain knowledge from that I would never have been able to just simply walk into that room. Education looked like me sitting on boards. It looked like me sitting on advisory committees for things like fishing, things like Algonquin Park. I sit on the board of directors for the Friends of Algonquin Park. I sit on the Fisheries Advisory Committee, and all of that has been education for me. When I get that opportunity for education, I can then pass it on to the folks in my community who would have never even thought that something like fishing could be a part of their story. And we think about fishing. Fishing is now another conversation that I can have about how we can get to trails, how we can get people to get used to trails, to get to these beautiful fishing spots that are being maintained by people who have the knowledge that I didn't have when I started this thing. I think about how many folks are coming into spaces like Canada, how immigration has changed the landscape of what so many countries look like. And we're all not coming into or moving through different immigration systems and going into countries that look as what we move from our home spaces with. So talking about conservation. When I moved here, conservation again was not a concept. It was an idea for me of watching my grandma take the 12 million plastic bags that she used for grocery shopping, sticking them in a cupboard so she could use them 500 times. Or the margarine container, using that to give food to someone else. When I came to Canada and I found out that conservation was an idea born in indigeneity, I was able to take that education and spread it through the folks that I work with. It was the way that I approach how my relationship would be to the outdoors is through education and educating people about their place in the outdoors, about their place in simply just existing in a place where we are not told that these are part of our stories, but through education, building relationships, building community, building atmosphere, building safety, addressing what safety looks like within the context of trails, and me being a woman of color who I want to walk the Trans-Canada Trail one day. I mean, it's a lofty goal. My knees might give out before time happens, but it gives, talking about safety is me knowing that through education that's being passed down through the work that Brown Girl Outdoor World does or all the other organizations, that the trails are safe enough for me as a woman of color, to want to venture out on these trails, to be able to go out there and have experiences like Deanne Whalen would have when other folks walk up to her on a trail, or that someone would see me enough because they're educated enough about my presence to also think that my safety is important and want to offer me a space in their home or want to offer me a tent or fix my shoes for me. I want to know that through education that started from where I didn't have it to how I was able to spread it to folks can offer me that same sense of safety on one of the trails that I would venture on.
Chuck, you said you work in education,
Yes.
so...
Yeah, it's so rewarding. I'm fortunate in my university that the classes that I teach are United Nations classes. And so different continents are represented, and just the thirst, the desire for knowledge, the desire for opportunity, as Andy was saying, is really tremendous. And I think I'm blown away by how smart these young people are. They're a lot smarter than I was at their age, and they're so worldly. And I say to them all the time, you know, you live in an interesting world in which you can get an education, and then you can basically choose where in the world you'd like to work and live and, you know, raise families and all that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty powerful environment to be in. It's very challenging as an educator, I think, just to meet where they are mentally and the kind of opportunities they want in their lives. So it's great in that regard. And They're really into sustainability. They understand that word really well, and they're into some positive work in their lives. And also, what I'm very impressed by is that they don't have the trappings that I grew up with. They don't see color. They just see people, and they respect ethnicities, and they respect different points of view. My classes are all very interactive, and they're practicum based. So the students are required to work in teams. They've never done that. They have different backgrounds, and they have to solve for problems. And I try not to be the dad and interrupt the arguments and the disagreements. I try to use that as an opportunity for them to really solve those problems. It's very impressive to see in 15 weeks' time how these students grow in that time period and understand how to solve those problems. So it's a great environment to be in. I have obviously a United States perspective, but I've been fortunate to travel around the world, go to universities in China, in South America, in Europe, and I find a very similar culture there. So it's a fertile ground for us to be in and to grow our movement, as Jeff said, exponentially, but they need to have that invitation, the opportunity to work with those of us in the trail space, to understand what we know, to pass the torch, to pass that knowledge base on, because I think they're excited about it and they want to get involved. They want to do something positive for the planet and for their communities, and we have to create the opportunity for that to happen.
Can I add one
Yeah.
thing to that as well? I think we're so focused on a youth audience, and the youth are the future. We know this, but there's so much opportunity so much knowledge and opportunity that is held within us as elders. One of the programs that I work on with, I call myself an elder at 42. It's okay.
Old soul.
It's old soul. I grew up with my grandma. I have no choice. When we think about education, when the work that I do through BGOW is simply to educate the educators. Because we look at how many people, trails for a lot of folks is a very new conversation. And that's because, again, we talk about global movement. We talk about things that as, again, that family heirloom of information that you might have had access to. A lot of folks who are my age group didn't know that, because we were born, grown, and raised in households where our parents were doing 3-4 jobs that didn't allow for recreation. Trail usage is outdoor recreation. And if when our parents were so busy, running a hair salon, running a shop, running a kitchen, running a family home, doing all these things, these conversations fell by the wayside. So now we have an opportunity to bring that education not only to youth, but to use these opportunities to also engage with communities that want this knowledge, they want this information. It does us a disservice, I think, to say we're always going to just educate youth. When we look, during the pandemic, I was hosting sessions simply on how to pitch a tent. I was hosting sessions simply on how to book a campsite. I was hosting sessions on simply how to locate that information online, because a lot of folks don't know that. So assuming that only youth need this information, again, it does us a disservice. We need to still look at the value that exists within us who are above that 30 age group, because everybody cuts off youth at 29. It does us a very big disservice if we continue to just look at youth and the knowledge that exists within a youth demographic as the only thing that is valid and viable for the future. We need to think about just how much information is stored here that can be passed on as education to folks who have ward or who have a caregiver role in their life.
Jeff, you touched a bit about the fundraising. Like, for me, this is one of the big elephant in the room: money. Like, trail people are scared to ask for money, and we don't think we deserve all the money we need to build project. There's going to be a huge transfer of generational wealth happening in the near future. Some of you are working with philanthropy organization. How do you see we can engage that next generation that will irritate that money to become as passionate as the actual donor into our sector?
You want me to start with that?
Yeah, go.
It's a big question. Because it's not all about money. It's about the knowledge base that we were just talking about is in multiple directions. It's not in one direction. We learned even just yesterday about how indigenous knowledge can inform us, and I learned 20 new things yesterday that are part of that exchange of knowledge. So everything we do, that has value. The reason that's important from a philanthropic and wealth sense is that people who have made a lot of money suddenly realize maybe they should start doing something really good with it. And you hope that that's the possibility, right? So the philanthropists are looking for those good projects. They want to make something good happen. And if there's one good thing in this world, it's trails. We are the thing that they're looking for to find that moment where they can say, we did this. When you think of, I mean, I'll name a few of our famous philanthropists, Bill Gates, right? He's going to cure malaria. It's an extraordinary accomplishment. But there will be no physical reminder of that into the future other than people who are much healthier. We should get to Bill Gates and start talking trails, right? How do we start to put on the ground the physical changes that represent this future world? And another project that the three of us worked on, I'll just use as an example, Northwest Arkansas. If somebody had asked me 20 years ago, where's one of the greatest towns in North America to go to for trails, and I had answered Bentonville, Arkansas, I don't think I would have gotten the right answer. It's there, trust me, they have done it. We were first brought in there about 20 years ago by the Walton Family Foundation, a name that may not have connoted sustainability and environmental responsibility and all the other things we'd like to talk about. But they realized that the corporation that their family started is not what it will be in the future, that the footprint that they've created now will not sustain itself unless there's significant change. And we were brought in to create a project that was called the Razorback Greenway. Was built end to end in a period of about 4 years. Chuck lived there, wrestled that bear to the ground more than once. That led to regional open space plan, complete streets plan, safe routes to schools plans. They've built half a dozen mountain bike parks, and they are now, the entire state of Arkansas changed its marketing slogan to the natural state. And I'll just describe 1 mile of that trail so you can get a sense of what philanthropy can do at a big scale. The first mile, if you start in the town square in Bentonville, they've restored the town square. Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, his truck is sitting there. His original store is on the square. There's a brand new museum, hotel. Everything is completely restored. There's interpretation in the square of America's Civil War history, not all of which is good, but they try to tell that story. And then as you move through the square, you come onto the Razorback Greenway, which passes through a new play park right in the middle of the city, accessible to all kids, a food truck site, and then into an arboretum that leads to a brand new billion-dollar art museum of American art, followed by some of the best single-track trails you'll find anywhere in the world. And that's just the first mile, okay? That ripple effect of that project and what it's done, again, it's one of these catalyst moments, has led so many communities to realize, why aren't we doing that? If Bentonville, Arkansas could do that in 15 years' time, and I live in a place where Thomas Edison founded General Electric. We have philanthropy. We have people who have been successful. They just haven't focused their energy on that. And everywhere in the world, there's someone in your community, in our communities, that can help make that change happen. We just need to show them that it's possible.
Yeah.
So I want to call out Aaron Rushing. Aaron, would you raise your
Aaron here?
hand? He's here.
Where
So-
are you, Aaron?
Yeah, Aaron, with Northwest Arkansas Trailblazers. So he's
Aaron,
here.
thank you.
Yeah, he's done a great job
All right.
working with that. So here's my two answers to the question. Number one, you're not chasing money. You're chasing vision. So I like to say this, don't pursue money, but pursue a very, very powerful vision, because all of this money likes powerful vision. They want to find the next really great project to be involved with. So in the example that Jeff just gave, it was really a powerful vision that was launched. And then what we had to do was actually find the money. And we were able to find the money because people were so attracted to the vision, they want to be part of the project. That's step one. Step two is we always leverage. We use leverage to raise money. We always want a lead gift from someplace. It could be from government, it could be from the private sector, whatever. We always want to get a lead gift, and then we want to go and shop that lead gift and leverage more people into the project. And you build what we call as a funding quilt. You build lots and lots of people in, and you build the value of being part of that vision and part of that partnership. And that's how you aggregate big money into projects. That's the way we do it. Now, of course, we're framing it from the United States and American model, and it could be more challenging to do this in other parts of the globe. But I still think that these things work because as I travel around to different continents and different countries, I see that same level of opportunity there. The financing will be different and the structures will be different, but I think that's a great way to approach it. So we always have this question. Every project we go to, they're like, where are we going to get the money? And we really try to stop and say, well, how inviting and how powerful is your vision? What is your vision all about, and how will you execute that vision in the landscape that you're trying to work in? And that can be conservation-based, or it could be based on equitable access. But there's a lot of ways in which that vision can be structured to be powerful and appealing. But that's the way I would recommend going about it.
And in the case of Bentonville, the Walton Foundation's goal, if I recall, was that for all the reasons you said, you wouldn't have mentioned Bentonville. Like, it's in the middle of fucking nowhere, and it's got this world headquarters that they needed to attract the best talent in the world to come and work. And the only way to do that is by creating the quality of life and the access to recreation and to nature that people expect from a high quality of life. They had to create that there, and that was the vision and the motivation for doing that. And that's, government can often have the same motivation, just takes a little more to wrangle it from.
I just want to add to that, maybe from a more global perspective, in my experience, projects I worked on in some of the townships in Johannesburg, favelas in Rio, at times when people were saying there's no money to do this in these communities. And yet, I was in Rio as part of the run-up to the Olympics. How much money got spent in Brazil in setting up the Olympic Games, and yet there are these communities that weren't receiving what was necessary. Certainly, industries in South Africa, we know, have globally been successful. Part of the problem is just the allocation of the resources that exist in the places that people need them the most. And I think that our friends, the Panelists from Colombia, will probably tell the story better than I could, but when they became elected officials in Bogota, 99% of the money was being spent on 1% of the people. When they changed that, their election results got very, very good. You build the infrastructure that people need with the resources that you have. Project that we're working on with World Resources in Ethiopia and Addis, they just did a simple census. What percentage of people, how do they get around? How do they walk? They maybe ride bikes. Some of them, very few of them have cars. Some transit, tuk-tuks, all the other things. And it turned out that more than 50% of the people were walking. And that was looked down upon. That was seen as a negative. We have to get those people beyond. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is saying we all should walk more, and we're wearing these devices that are telling us how many steps we counted in a day. They've reallocated their government spending based on that, and now have a program where they're spending 50% of their infrastructure money on people walking. It's a tremendous success with the money that was already there. So it's not always a quest to find more. Right. It's a quest to make the right decisions with the resources that we do have, no matter where we are in the world.
Amen.
Yeah, very good.
So, as a final question for all of you, in one sentence, what is your vision for the future of trail? And I will start with you, Lesley.
No pressure.
Just one sentence.
Just one sentence.
Okay, 2, 3 sentences.
Oh, thank you.
2 minutes, let's say.
My vision for the future of trail is to see more people using the resources that they already have and really dedicating as much time as they possibly can to the maintenance of trail, and leaving all of the difficult tasks of documenting, inventorying all of their assets to the technology, and just using what little resources you have as smartly as possible, and partnering with experts who can help you get there, because that is how you'll have your trail last as long as possible and overcome any difficulty, whether that be more existential in nature, climate change, or just with management changes. So reach out, talk to experts in those fields, and we'll be there to help. I'm really hopeful for that.
I'm going to try to say this with one word, dream. Give the people of the world a chance to dream at a time when we need it in more ways than we realize. These are some tough times right now. I look at my kids and the world that we're giving to them. We're supposed to make it a better place, but at least allow that dream to continue. That's the best we can do.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'll use the word expansive. Expansive in the way that it gives us an opportunity to see more of who could be a part of that, again, knowing, coming to know, love, and wanting to work to widen what trails can look like or who gets to be on trails. I want us to be expansive in our thought process. When we think about diversity, are we thinking about who's in the room? Are we thinking about inclusion in the way of who gets to have a voice at the table? Are we thinking about opportunity, access, what safety can look like? Trails can cover all those opportunities and then engage a demographic of people who could reap thousands of benefits from simply spending time on a trail, whether it is close to home or whether it is, not thinking so much about the opportunity and going to walk the El Camino Trail. It is an opportunity for us to be expansive in how we view our as a collective, our role in what the expansion of who uses trail can look like.
Green infrastructure. We have a carbon problem of our own making that we must solve right away. And I look at trails and the corridors associated with them, which we call Greenways, as being a vital and important solution. And we need green infrastructure commitments all over the planet.
Thanks.
I'm going to suggest that trails are not an end in and of themselves. We must remember as a movement, as individual trail champions, that trails are about connecting people and places. They're about connecting people to places. They're about connecting communities and creating community. And if we forget that, I think we run into a danger of sort of over-defining trails, being too not expansive enough, not dreaming big enough, because we just think of trails as being sort of one thing. So let's be careful about that, and let's dream big and be expansive and realize that trails truly are the silver bullet to all kinds of the world's ills, and people need us, and we should take that responsibility seriously and do big things.
Wow, that's inspiring. Demiesha? Yeah.
And I think my one ask of all of us in this room is that when we think about the word diversity, I personally hate the word diversity as a starter of any conversation, but we know that it exists. And if we can think about the world in a diverse way, and again, we think about flora and fauna, I want us to think about people in that same way and the importance that people play in that development of trails, in the development of relationships around trails. Don't be afraid. Again, that is not the pink elephant that we want to not address. As a reminder, we do ourselves a disservice if we don't address that big elephant in the room. Again, we have so many folks who are using trails, so many folks who want to use trails, who have no knowledge of how to even get to a trail. So again, that idea of expansion in thought, expansion in how we build community, expansion in how we create that invitation. I was thinking about how Lesley said technology. Every one of us has access to technology in some way, shape, or another. Use it to create that invitation. I'm always open to saying, hey, if you want to reach out to Demiesha to ask her questions about how to, reach out to community, please do that. I'd rather you ask me than use a fear-based approach and not ask a question, irrespective of what my response could be to you.
Yeah. True that. So, for me, there's a couple of words that came out through this conference. Hope, that was a big word. Dream big, we're able to make it, and trails are the future. So we need to invite people to join us in that future and build it to make the world a better place. Thank you very much, everyone on this panel. It was inspiring. Have a nice day. Megan, to you.
Well, Well, that was a very inspiring discussion to frame our day. It's all about building a resilient trail sector. That's all of you in this room. At TransCanada Trail, we often talk about, if not us, then who? And I think that's for all of you, everyone in this room. If not us, who are leaders in the trail sector, then who? I'm very inspired by the panelists today who talked and shared. I think one of the words I come away with as well is the word courage. As a leader, we have to be the ones and the courage to go after government funding and make the asks and ensure we have technology and make sure that we are accessible and inclusion. And it's all of you in this room that have that courage to be the leaders that we want. And I thank you and I thank the panelists one more time for this excellent session.